Good evening, Mr. Khair and Arif Tov. My name is Mahmoud Abu Arab. I was born in a village named Majd al-Kurum. For those who speak Arabic, the name of the village implies that the village is rich in orchards of olives, grapes, and figs. Visitors to the hills surrounding the village can see wells digged in the stones that were used to manufacture wine. This history goes back to the time before Jesus. This fact confirms that the claims of a Zionist organization that Palestine is a land with no people, for people with no land, is false. Always Palestine was habitated by people such as Canaanites, Phoenicians, Romans, Persians, Jews, Egyptians, Arabs, Ottoman. In fact, Palestine and Mesopotamia were occupied more than any other country in the world in the written history, in our human kind history. Majd al-Kurum is a village among 72 villages in the province of Acre, Akka. In 1948, 43 villages were destroyed and wiped from the map by Zionist organizations such as Irgun and Lehi, while only 29 villages in the province of Akka remained until the present time. My parents lived and grew up as their ancestors did in the village of Sha'ab. They were forced to leave Sha'ab in 1948. The majority of residents in Sha'ab were dumped to Lebanon, while some others were displaced to neighboring villages. Zionist militias intentionally committed massacres in some Palestinian villages, as my friend mentioned in Deir Yassin, and spread the news in order to create panic and fears among Palestinians, and hence urged them to escape to neighboring Arabic countries, mainly Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt. Zionist militia aimed also to arrest Palestinian men and take them by trucks, like goods, and dump them on the borders with neighboring countries. As Sha'ab is close to Lebanese borders, my father was expelled to Lebanon with other men. He managed to return walking during the nights to reunite with my mother and my oldest siblings. This scenario was repeated 4 times. But my father, who then was young and who believed that he should remain in his land, managed to return to Majd al-Kurum, where my mother stayed waiting for him with my siblings. Zionist organizations aimed by dumping men to neighboring countries that their families would follow them due to difficulty surviving alone without their husbands. Finally, my father managed to stay in Palestine, and he was given the Israeli identity card. My family remained living in Majd al-Kurum until 1973. Only then, the Israeli authority allowed us to repurchase the home that my family lived in before 1948. My father was unfortunate as he passed away in 1967, 6 years before we managed to return to our village. It is important to note that we repurchased our home from Keren Kayemet Israel, a Zionist organization that managed Palestinian occupied lands. Until today, my siblings who are still living in Sha'ab are prohibited from accessing their land, even that land which is still vacant and not used by new Israeli settlements. As said earlier, my father was arrested and my mother escaped with my family from Sha'ab to a nearby village, Majd al-Kurum. She had her 4 little children. Abdul was a few weeks old. My mother carried on her head some belongings, and on her arm she had her newborn child. While walking in the bush, she thought that her baby died, and she put him under the tree, waiting for any man to help her to bury him. My brother was lucky that no one was available to help my mother burying him. And after a while, my grandmother, who accompanied the family, noticed that the child moving, and they decided to take him and continue their trip to exile. As a child, I cried many times when I heard my mother telling this story. Now, as an adult, I can put myself in my mother's shoes and imagine the conflict and trauma that she had when she was making decisions between multiple bad choices. To leave her a baby under the tree for the sake of rescuing the family, her remaining children, or stay with her dead child, or seemingly dead child, and risk the rest of her family. She acted by her instinct, and she managed to have her baby. Another event that happened during the first few weeks or months maybe after the Nakba, when my father returned at night to our home in Sha'ab to bring some wheat and grains that they stored when they lived in Sha'ab. Since the area was a military zone and residents of Sha'ab were not allowed to return to their homes, an Israeli soldier stopped my father and pointed a gun to him. My father raised up his hands and addressed the soldier, saying something to the effect, "Sir, I am carrying food for my children." The soldier confirmed what my father carried, and he let him go. In Israel, there is a strange law called present absentees. Present absentees, this law was created to allow Keren Kayemet Israel, which is equivalent of our land office in Australia. That law is allowed the Keren Kayemet Israel to confiscate land of people who were present in Israel after the creation of Israel, but at the same time were displaced to another village inside Israel. In the early 50s, my father, with a group of other families, hired a lawyer and tried to get their confiscated land back. At the conclusion of the court settlement, the solicitor that acted for my father interpreted for him from Hebrew to Arabic the conditions of the settlement, which indicated that my father agrees to sell his land to Keren Kayemet Israel, and in return, he will receive lands of people that remained in exile outside Israel. As an angry farmer who felt deceived by the legal system, he was furious and aggressively pulled the documents from the solicitor's hand and tore it. He refused to be seen as selling his land and getting alternative confiscated land of other Palestinians. Since then, the decision was made: no further access to his land. He passed away in 1967, and his hope to access his land died with him. I want to conclude by remembering that we in Australia celebrate National Reconciliation Week, and in this occasion, I call Palestinians and Jews to forgive each other and live in peace on the same land. Thank you.